I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a wonderful book. It is called The Shimmering, and it's written by a terrific author by the name of Michael L. Clark. This captivating novel follows Emily and Daniel, a happily married couple whose lives are torn apart when Daniel is accidentally sent 200 years into the past. As they both face danger and mystery, they must find a way back to each other before time itself keeps them apart forever. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing this wonderful book. The links are below the interview. Michael, thanks so much for being our guest here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Logan.
It's my pleasure. The Shimmering is such a unique and original story, one that explores time travel as well. Give us a little idea of the inspiration behind it.
Well, I spent a lot of years down in the Middle Tennessee area. I worked for the Postal Service there for 25 years. My family and I lived there for 30 years, and we homeschooled our two daughters. So we spent a lot of time in historic sites like the Natchez Trail. And as I visited those places along the Natchez Trail, like the Gordon House, which is the first brick style, federal style house built in the state of Tennessee, I got to know these people that lived back in the early 1800s, like John and Dolly Gordon. And I began to, as I read their plaques, wonder what it would be like to go back in time and see how they actually lived. And so that's where I got the idea for the book, The Shimmering.
Wonderful. Let's give the folks at home an overview of the story. So Daniel is accidentally sent back into time, and what happens?
Well, he's on a trail ride with his buddy on the trace, which is something people do quite often in the Natchez Trace area. They are actually located there near the Gordon House exhibit when they ride back into the forest and accidentally find a time portal that sends them back 200 years into 1817. Daniel meets other people who are living in the area. He meets Dolly Gordon, and he discovers after being there more than a day that he evidently has gone through a time portal because everything is not the same as it was when he rode through earlier that day.
Yeah.
So he meets people like Dolly and David Crockett and people like that. And he's trying to find, once he realizes he's traveled back in time, how can he get back home to his wife, Emily? Emily is concerned when he doesn't show up for at home for supper that night, after he had promised he would be back before dark. And the next morning, when he still hasn't arrived, she reports him missing to the police. And then she begins to look for him herself by traveling to the trace and contacting the park rangers there to see if they can help her locate what has happened to him. She travels down the trail where they were riding and finds where his horses were traveling, and then suddenly their footprints end. And so she begins to question what has actually happened and how did he disappear.
Wonderful. Well, it's a great story in that it not only tells the story of this couple, but also gives the chance for Daniel and the reader to explore, historical times as well. For the folks at home who don't know what it is, tell us a little bit about the Natchez Trace.
The Natchez Trace was a historic road that ran from Nashville, Tennessee, all the way down to Natchez, Mississippi. And it was also known as the Devil's Backbone because there were a lot of bandits that frequented the trail waiting for merchants to follow the trail down from Nashville down to Natchez, which is how a lot of the merchants got their goods down to New Orleans. They would travel down the trace to Natchez, Mississippi, and then they would float their goods up the Mississippi River into New Orleans. And that's how they got all their goods from the north down to the south into New Orleans. So it was a place where It was owned mostly by Chickasaw Indians. They owned the land around there, but John Gordon had developed a partnership with the chief of the Chickasaw Indians, William Colbert, and they started a ferry that crosses the Duck River there, close to the Gordon house, and so they worked together closely while Gordon spent a lot of his time fighting with Andrew Jackson in the Battle of 1812 and the Indian Wars down in Mississippi and Florida. Dolly took care of the things that were going on there on the farm.
Mm. Wonderful, wonderful. It's such a unique aspect of American history that very few know about, I feel, or relatively few. If you're not from that section of the country, you're probably unaware of it. So it's a cool exploration of that in the book as well. Have you envisioned this as a film, perhaps, or a TV series?
Man, I sure have. I would love to see it happen someday.
Yeah.
Just got to find the right people to help me out with that.
Exactly. Well, the book is out there now, and that's at least half the battle because you never know whose hands it'll wind up in. So, Hollywood, if you're listening, this is a terrific original story that would be both contemporary drama and historical fiction. And I think the viewers would love it. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel and the challenges he faces surviving in the year 1818. Tell us about how those experiences shape his character.
Well, he's a historian by nature. He actually graduated from Lipscomb University with a teaching degree in history. And so he loves history and spent a lot of time on the Natchez Trail as well as other places like Stone River Park in Murfreesboro and the Carton Plantation in Franklin and other places like that. So when he arrives in the Shimmering or through the Shimmering, he decides to do some more research while he's there.
Mm.
One thing that is intriguing to him is the death of Meriwether Lewis. Meriwether Lewis died at Griner's Stand, which is an inn where people would spend the night as they were traveling down the trace. Griner's Stand was not owned by the Chickasaw Indians. It was actually not on Chickasaw land. It was right on the border.
Mm.
And this is where Meriwether Lewis was on his way to Washington to turn in his journals to be reimbursed for his work that he had done on the Lewis and Clark expedition and work that he was doing as governor of Louisiana.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of questions about his death. Some people believe that he was murdered, and
Mhm.
others believe that he committed suicide because of failed relationships with women in the past. So there's still a big debate as to whether it's suicide or murder today. But
Yes.
Daniel goes and does research on his own and meets the Grinders, and while he's there, he also comes in contact with Davy Crockett and
Mm.
develops a relationship with him.
Very cool. Very cool. He also has to deal with thievery and Indian attacks, and that kind of adds to the tension and suspense in the story as well, right?
Right. There's a sect of the Chickasaw Indians fictionally. This is what I made up, but
Mhm.
there's a sect of the Chickasaw that were called the Black Hand. And the Black Hand were protectors of a burial ground that was close to the Gordon house. And this is where the Shimmering occurred. And so when they saw that Daniel had violated their burial ground by traveling through there, they went and sought retribution against him. And so he has to deal with the Indian attacks as well.
Explain the significance of the title, The Shimmering.
Well, the Shimmering is a kind of a description that Daniel saw as he approached the area where the burial ground was. He saw a shimmering light, very much like you would see on a hot pavement in the desert somewhere, where the heat waves are just rising up from the asphalt. And so he thought it was curious. And then when he traveled through, he found out that he was actually going back in time. So that's where the name of the Shimmering came from, just his realization of what he saw that didn't seem right at the beginning.
Very cool. It's a great title. It's an intriguing title, which helps people pick up the book, start reading. Once they read it a little bit, they'll be lost in the pages and continue reading, no doubt. The name of the book is The Shimmering. It's written by Michael L. Clark. It is a captivating novel that follows Emily and Daniel, a happily married couple whose lives are ripped apart when Daniel is accidentally sent 200 years into the past. They both face danger and mystery along the way, but they must find a way back to each other. It's a wonderful read. You'll explore a little bit about a history. You'll explore a little bit about a resilient love, and you will be absolutely captured by the pages as you turn them as quickly as possible, because you'll want to find out what's happening next. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much, Logan.
I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.